Hello and welcome to Her Next Step, the podcast where women in the public service talk about how their passion and their intuition led them to interesting and exciting career paths. We'll hear about the fears and challenges that could have held them back and about the internal and external supports that enabled them to take their next step. I'm Lily Murphy and I'm speaking to women whose stories will, I believe, inspire you to wonder what stepping stones would help you to take your next step. In this episode of Her Next Step, Andrea Feeney, CEO of the State Exams Commission, shares valuable tips about how to influence people and create big change. She particularly talks about identifying the gatekeepers and the people with influence and bringing them on board right from the start. Andrea also talks about how to challenge someone's opinions when their easiest answer is no. I think you'll really enjoy Andrea's drive and commitment to change. Andrea, you and I have worked side by side on a few occasions, and so I know about you that you're absolutely passionate about ensuring that all of the students in this country get a fair and equitable professional, I suppose, access to exams and experience of the exam system. I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with you here today that talks about your career and some of the interesting advice that you have for women in terms of how they might also pursue careers in the public sector. So thank you so much for joining us from Athlone.
Thanks very much, Lily. I'm very honoured actually to have the opportunity to talk to you and as you say, about something that I am passionate about, which is women in leadership in the public service. And yes, we have worked together many times at this stage. And you've really helped the organisation in terms of the work that you've done for us. So thanks for that. Yeah, just interested to answer your questions. I've been kind of kicking things around in my mind. I'm hoping all the right things will come out that I want to say.
Yeah.
But again, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, it's nice to stop sometimes, isn't it, to just have an opportunity to reflect on your career and how you got to be where you are today.
Absolutely.
So we'll start where I usually do. I'm always curious to know, when you were young, when you were in primary school, if I had spoken to some of your peers or indeed to your family and said, somebody will end up as this chief executive of the State Exams Commission, would they have automatically assumed it would be you?
They probably would have thought I'd end up somewhere. I certainly never thought I'd end up in this job. And my father was a civil servant, a senior civil servant with the Department of Education in Athlone, and actually was the head of the examination section at one stage. And I grew up with seeing him working all of the hours that God sent, because you mentioned at the outset, the type of service that we try to deliver to students, the high quality, the professionalism that we put into it. But it's a service that's full of immutable deadlines throughout the year, and people work in this organisation. Culturally, there's a real ethic of hard work, because that's what it takes to deliver the state exams each year. I never thought I would end up here, to be honest with you. And you talk about forks in the road, and when choices come to your attention, I kind of went the direction that wouldn't have brought me here, quite deliberately, because I didn't want to be seen as following in my dad's footsteps at any stage. And then by circumstance and happen chance, I had followed promotion to go to different areas of the civil service. My husband had also followed promotion, and then the only place that we ended up being able to be together back in the early noughties was Athlone. And it was a surprise to me as much as anyone else that firstly I was in the civil service, and also that I was in Athlone, because I've kind of said I don't want to I don't want to follow the same footsteps. So, by a process of, as I said, happenstance, I ended up in Athlone in the Department of Education at the time that the State Examinations Commission was being set up in 2003. And I took that leap from the department to the new organisation at assistant principal officer level, with responsibility for effectively setting the organisation up from scratch. So I had that opportunity at the time to work very closely with the CEO and the other senior managers back in 2003, and worked my way up through the organisation then in various different roles. There's not an area of the organisation actually that I haven't worked in. And that's brought me to the role of CEO back in 2020. So they might have seen something for me that I wouldn't have seen for myself. But it has been an interesting journey in getting here.
So I'm just curious then, you said you didn't go into the civil service straight away. What did you do when you left school?
Yeah, again, back to the work ethic and what I saw around me. So I had a mother who worked in the home, but worked very, very hard and did everything. She, made clothes for us, she tiled, she did everything in the house. And then my father, who was working very hard as the breadwinner in the organization. So we grew up with this huge work ethic. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I left school. I applied for marketing and communications. That's the kind of route I saw myself going into in college. But I wasn't committed to it. So I deferred the college places for a year. And I actually worked in retail. I worked in Dunn Stores for a year. And it was a great grounding, again, in terms of hard work and effort that's needed in that environment. And then I'm sure, as many civil servants will say to you, my mother applied for the civil service job for me. And I ended up somewhere at some stage where I had to do an interview or an examination, which I hadn't applied for myself. And I ended up almost the accidental civil servant. So we're a bit of, I think there's lots of civil servants. We're cliches really,
Mm.
in that we didn't aim to be there, but we ended up there. And I started at the bottom. I started as a clerical assistant in the Department of Social Protection in 1991, in August of 1991, with the intention of actually taking up my college place in October.
Mm.
I said, okay, that's nice. I was working in Dunn's. I've gotten this job, this clerical job. I'll start that, see where it goes for a few months. I'll enjoy having the money and the social life in Dublin, and won't it all be great? And then I'll take up the deferred college place in October. I even paid my registration fee late in September. And then I sat down and talked to myself and said, what are you actually doing here? You didn't really know what you wanted to do in the first place. And here you are, you're in the job, you're enjoying the work. And I was really enjoying the social life at the time. So I stayed. And I have mentioned it to you before how I did go back to education as a very kind of late learner when my children were very small. But I didn't go into formal education straight away. I went into the civil service in 1991. I was promoted in 1995. I was promoted again in 1999. I was promoted again in 2003 and again in 2007 and then in 2011. So I kind of, worked my way up through the grades in the civil service, and I got some really fortunate and lucky breaks along the way
Mm.
where I got exposure to some very interesting, some very committed, some very change oriented people that kind of dispelled the notion that I might have had about what the civil service was like, even at that stage in the 90s and in the 2000s, as somewhere that was staid and risk averse and change averse. And my experience has been anything but that. It's
Mm.
been a really great career and really great to have an opportunity to be able to affect change. And I've had that opportunity to affect change. I won't quite say in all of the grades, but certainly when I got into the sort of supervisory management ranks, I've had that opportunity to make changes along the way, which I've really appreciated.
Gosh, yeah, it really is an interesting trajectory, isn't it? And at some point
Mm,
you went back to college. So you said your children were
yeah.
small?
Yeah, so my youngest was a year and a half, I'd say, at the time. So I did a master's in management with Smurfit in 2010. It started in September of 2010. And I'd been looking before that. A lot of people in the civil service, they do the IPA
Hmm.
and they do, sort of things that are very much in the public administration stage. Well, I was getting lots of experience in public administration. I sort of wanted to do something that was a bit broader. I didn't have time to do a full MBA. And then somebody told me about this program in Smurfit, which is their 2 year a master's in management. So it provided for both graduates, but also people who had come with a lot of experience to learn. And for me also to validate the experience that I'd already
Mm.
built up in my career in the civil service. And I really loved it. I loved a couple of things about it. I loved the networking piece and meeting new people. But I actually loved the fact that I wanted to learn. I'd really, really put everything that I had into it. I really surprised myself actually in how much I wanted to learn. Because then I was in school, I was an okay student and very intelligent, and I probably got away with a lot of, but the brain gets a bit lazy at times, and I mightn't have applied myself always in the way that I ought to apply myself. When I went back to education, I had really matured in terms of saying, I'm doing this for myself. I really want to do it and do it well. And so I was, traveling up to Dublin a few times a week. I was giving up weekends to be in Dublin. And as I said, my children were 3 and a year and a half at that stage. I had a very good mother family and husband, back at the ranch, being able to mind them. And at the time, I mean, the job was extremely busy as well.
Mm,
So just trying to balance all of those things was a challenge, but one that I really appreciated.
mm,
And so I did my master's with Smurfit through that time, graduated with distinction, and learned a lot about myself. But I felt really validated as well. So great experience, and one that I'd recommend. And if I know I was thinking about it, I would actually advise myself, if now, to say, go and do something and do it earlier. And I think, that would have been something that I would have enjoyed. It just took me a long time to get to that
mm.
understanding, I suppose.
For our listeners, Andrea, it strikes me that direct entry into a master's is something that people often forget about, forget that it's
Mm,
actually possible. So a lot of
yeah,
people maybe hold themselves back because they think, oh, well, I'd have to do a degree. But actually that idea of a master's, that the qualification is the experience that you've gained through your work.
that's
Mm,
absolutely correct, Lily. Yeah. It's the experience that you've gained through your work. And you do have to put a lot of effort into convincing
mhm,
the selection body, because, they've it seems to me there's so many places for graduates and so many that are coming in on direct entry. And they need to be convinced by the experience that you have in terms of, will you have the ability to keep up with the program if you haven't gone through formal education previously. But there's a lot of supports in place, even the kind of learning to learn. And a lot of the graduate business schools, they operate a sort of learning to learn and induction preceding the commencement of the course, so that people come with a bit of confidence behind them to say, actually, I can do this. I am able to do this. And I do have this experience that I can bring and share. And just even thinking about the program, a lot of people learn from me in that
of
program,
course.
because you're not coming with, you're coming with a lot of experience. So I think people shouldn't allow that to hold themselves back. It's never too late. It's never too late to go back into learning, and to keep going with the educational journey. It is a confidence piece, though.
Mm.
But a very, very rewarding experience for.
When you said you probably should have done it earlier, was it confidence that held you back from doing it earlier, or was there something else?
Probably work, actually, sort of thinking
Mm,
I wouldn't be able to manage the time. I wouldn't be able to give it the time that it needs. And again, this again, before I had two children. I don't know why I thought when I had the two and the work that I was going to be able to manage it any better, but there must have been something, a light bulb moment at some stage that said, if you keep putting this off, and certainly there would have been an element of, in that decision making, an element of, I'll start it next year and I'll start it next year. But I kept thinking to myself, well, if I put this off, I won't ever do it. And it was something I really wanted to do. And I'm so glad that I did do it.
there's so many things I want to ask you, but I'm going to go back if for a minute. Somebody recently asked me about women and ambition, and where
Mm,
does it come from? And I'm curious, what's your answer to that question? Did it come from the home? I hear the work ethic came from home.
yeah.
Did ambition come from home as well?
I don't see myself as being ambitious at a personal level. The
Mm,
ambition that I have is to make a change and to make a difference. So I've never sort of said, God, when I, at a junior level, I really want to be, I think I might have said when I was in the revenue commissioners at some stage that I'd love to be the revenue commissioner at some stage. But I didn't sort of think, this about naked ambition in terms of I just want to get ahead. At each stage, I was making a difference, and I wanted to keep making a difference at the next level. So I don't know where that comes from. And maybe it was seeing, we've all been in organizations where we see people in grades thinking, actually, I could do a better job. I'd be better in that job than they are.
mm-hmm,
And certainly there was an element of that motivated me as well. But at each stage, really, it was about, I want to get to the next level because I can keep making a difference. I've done everything that I can do here. And I know if I got the next step up the ladder, I can make a difference there. And that's really what drives me and has continued to drive me, is that notion that I can make a difference, and I have had the opportunities to make change along the way, to provide a really good level of public service, to innovate, to be involved in transformational change. And I've just kept wanting to do that. I'm probably easily bored as well, Lily. So, when you're sort of there for a period of time thinking, okay, have I done everything that I can here? And if I want to keep doing something else that motivates me and keeps me interested, it needs to be somewhere else, either in another job or in the same organization at a
mm.
different level.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to mention the importance of work motivating you. You know,
Mm.
so often I think women get to a point, and women and men presumably get to
Mm.
a point in their career where they've kind of done it, and they maybe are in the same job, and for whatever reason they haven't looked outside to say what else is available to me,
Yeah,
and often that turns into what's known as eustress, you know, kind of stress that
yeah,
is born out of boredom, really.
yes,
And they can become somewhat destructive, actually, those people, you know,
yeah,
when actually what they really need and want is something that that will motivate them, that will inspire them, that will make them kind of push them
yeah.
to have to learn something new, etc. So you've done
Agree.
that on more than one occasion, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I think there's that phenomenon as well. Even people get stuck. They get stuck in roles, and they're longer in a role. They kind of think they lose confidence in their own ability as well, and you see that a lot.
Hmm.
Where people get to a certain level, they've done the job, they're very capable. They don't want to go for promotion, and at the same time, they feel, and it is a confidence piece. I see it a lot with women, actually, particularly, where people on the outside looking at them would say, "You're brilliant. You're so good. You're really good at this. You're so capable," and they don't see that or think that about themselves because they get a little bit stuck and can't really move forward. I think it's we in organizations have an obligation as well to the people that work for us
Hmm.
to help them with those decisions and to not leave people, even if they're really good people, in an area for too long. They need novelty, they need new experiences, they need to build up different networks of people, and they need to have exposure to different work as well. So I think as leaders in organizations, we have a real responsibility to the individuals, but also to the collective good of the organization to ensure that people don't get stuck in roles and that they don't experience the eustress, that they're not bored, and that we keep them motivated. As well as their own internal and inherent motivation, that the organization helps them to stay motivated as well.
Mm. And Andrea, you said to me, um, people should move on. You know,
Yes.
shouldn't stay for too long. So, do you want to say a little bit about that? Is it for that reason, for
Yeah.
the reason that you've just described, that they might get bored and no longer contribute, or why?
Yeah, and it mightn't even be moving on outside the organization. It could be moving in the organization, to get a bit more experience. I think, the experience would be if people are very long in role, they're not developing.
Mm,
They're not developing themselves, they're not developing their skill set, they're not learning because they know the job that they're doing, they know it inside out, they've seen every aspect of it, they've experienced every situation. And for them, I think it's just not good for the individual, not good for the organization. We need, as humans, we need to get different experiences. I've never met anyone who said, "I was so happy to stay in the same job for 25 years and not go anywhere else." I just don't think it's good for them. And it might feel very comfortable, like putting your foot into an old slipper. I'm very
mm,
comfy here. Sometimes we need to be a little uncomfortable, in terms of a little bit of uncertainty in terms of what's happening. And I say to my people here, they talk about, "Oh, we haven't done that before." And, I probably irritate people with my expressions, so I say, well, we need to be, comfortable in being uncomfortable. And certainly having come through COVID as an organization, we have gotten extremely comfortable in being uncomfortable given the level of change that the organization has gone through for the last few years. So I suppose it's more when I think about the boredom piece, even if people want to stay in role, I think sometimes we just need to say, I know you like it there, but actually it's going to be better for you in the long run if we move you and you have another experience, a new experience. And we've had some situations where we've moved people, they haven't liked the new role, and we have ended up moving them somewhere else. But just even to kind of make that leap, it's almost back to the conversation about going into education again. Why people don't have to, they can stay where they are. But it's actually good for them to
mm.
move into something, to have a different experience. It mightn't feel like that sometimes at the time.
Yeah, I suppose what I'm hearing in what you're saying, Andrea, is that the job, or isn't just about the job. It is about also the person in the job, and that the person in the job ideally is both motivated themselves, but also is growing in some way,
Yes.
and maybe that's something that you absolutely bring to your organisation and have brought to your career. That sense of you knew the importance of you continuing to grow.
Yeah, I really hope so, Lily. I know. Just even in terms of, yeah, the organization is more than the work that we do. We only deliver the work that we do through the people that work in the organization, and the people that work in the organization need to feel part of something bigger. They need to feel appreciated. They need to feel that their own personal development needs are cared about, and that they're not just considered cogs in the wheel of the state examinations machine or in the civil service, if you look at it more broadly, but that they're seen as individuals,
Mm.
and how they contribute is important, and that they're supported, and that we identify talent and nurture that talent and kind of bring it through the organization. So I would say very, very much so. Um, even as leaders, that's what, at all levels, that's what we're trying to do is, support people, recognize their talents, provide feedback, provide motivation, provide encouragement, but also to provide opportunities for people to make a difference in terms of the work that we're doing and that they're doing.
I'm going to just change tack a small bit. So you grew up in a house where your father was working, you said,
Mhm.
all the days, all the hours that God gave.
Yep.
And now it sounds to me from the little I know about you that you also work, a lot of hours
Mm.
in everyday week. How do you reconcile that? How do you manage, yourself, I suppose, in this busy role with a family, and how have you? I suppose that I know
Yeah.
they've moved on a bit at this stage, but
Yeah. Not always well, to be honest. And I mean, the working can be, I mean, working weeks can be 60 hours. Working weeks at times over certain parts of my career might have been 90 hours a week, 100 hours a week. During COVID, it was very intense, as it was in other areas of the public service, and the hours would have been longer and no breaks in between times. But those are the extremes. The normal is probably longer than the average working week, but I haven't met any senior civil servant at this level and ultimately being paid by the state to do what it is a very important job and with a salary that reflects that, who manages on a 35-hour or 40-hour working week. It's just not possible.
mm,
So you just have to make time. You make time for yourself, you make time for your family. I'm very fortunate. My husband, when my children were small, he probably took the bulk of some of the childcare responsibilities. I took my statutory maternity leave, and then my husband took career breaks and he worked flexi time. He was also in the civil service. So he wanted to do that and was happy to do that. And I had a lot of support from my family otherwise. I think it isn't necessary to make time for yourself throughout, and not
mm.
not lose yourself completely, I suppose, in work and managing. I mean, it's a cliche to say I have a work-life balance. I used to joke at some stage to say I have a perfect work-life balance. I have no life, because the hours are just so crazy.
Mm,
But I have actually gotten better at managing that. And one of the things that I tried to do since I became head of the organization is to really focus on sustainability within role within the SEC, because we have seen in the public service and in our organization, we've seen burnout and overwhelm, and those are not good things. And we certainly don't want to get a reputation as, uh, you know, we bring people in, they work very hard, but they're not able to sustain it. Because I mentioned previously my dad and working here culturally, there is this kind of always on culture here, this very long hours culture that I have been trying to put strategies in place to try and address that,
mm,
to have some level of normality in terms of what we do, but also always recognizing that things like the summers are going to be very challenging, because that's when examinations happen and then examination results have to issue after the summer.
mhm.
So it's a difficult one. It has been difficult for me. I have a tendency to overwork. I have a tendency to fill in work because I said I do get bored, and I like to be stimulated, and I find work very engaging and I enjoy it. And yeah, I can't deny it.
But isn't it one of the issues in a sense, Andrea, when, we're here, this program is about encouraging people to think about their careers and
Mm,
to, progress. But it is a real issue for people, but for women in particular, that notion that if I take a more senior role, that's what's required of me, is that I'm going to have to work ridiculous hours, possibly sacrifice my family life. So, is there something you would say to women about that?
Yeah, I think there's an effort reward balance to be borne in mind, and um, the family stage, it's not going to be there forever either. So I suppose if you can try and manage through that stage, and we support people here. We have people in management roles with small children, and people who've had, that conversation. I've had conversation with people about, will I take it, and how busy I'll be, and will I have time to spend with my children. I've mentioned trying to make the role more sustainable, but I think, there's a level of sacrifice, I suppose, in any work, in any job. The link between effort and success. You do have to put something in to get something out.
Mm,
Um, there are, though, across the public service, we have, lots of flexible policies that are there. But ultimately, there's an expectation in terms of effort
mm,
and hours, but there is a balance somewhere that can be struck so that you can manage both.
mm,
Um, Children are small as well for only a very short period of time. So
mhm.
it's really important for parents of young children. They do want to spend time with their families, and they will be able to spend time with their families. But if they want to get ahead, it probably is true to say there are some sacrifices that have to be made.
Yeah, so it strikes me there's a real sense here of knowing who you really are and knowing how how you can thrive, um, and what motivates you. That whole idea of self-awareness that allows you to say, yes, my family is important for me, and I want to devote time to that. But actually, I also want to do work that's stimulating
Yeah.
and positive, etc.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking about it. So I'm one of four in my family, and my sister works for a pharmaceutical company. She works very hard. I have a brother that runs his own business. He works very hard. And I have a younger brother that also works in the pharma industry, and again, very, very hard worker. And when I say hard workers, not just hard workers at work, but just generally in how they
Mm,
approach life. And my husband said to me the other day, my dad's coming up on 80 in the next couple of years. And my husband said to me, your dad must be so proud. He said, I've never seen a family where you such a work ethic in terms of all of you being grafters. So, in terms of just wanting to put something in. So I do have that sense of work ethic and the what comes with hard work and actually enjoying it. The self-awareness piece is an interesting one. I probably used to run a mile maybe until at one stage in my career where I really had to do sort of a lot of introspective work. And I did work with a coach at that stage. But up to then, I probably would have run a mile to start thinking about myself. If somebody to ask you a question. So, how did you do that?
mm,
Or why did you do it in a certain way? And it can be a hard enough journey to kind of dig deep and think, well, I don't really know why. I didn't think about it, I just did it.
mm.
Whereas if you to be able to stand back and reflect on why you do things in a certain way and what actually does make you tick, it's actually really powerful and really interesting. And for me, it's one that's really helped me in leading other people, to be able to say the kind of how, and it kind of challenges people a bit when you're asking them questions. We're talking about a work situation where you're asking, how did you do that? Or why did you do that? And people, they kind of struggle a bit to answer the question. So I think it's a really interesting um, process to
Mm.
have that level of self-awareness. For some people, I'm sure it's very natural. For me, it wasn't natural. It's one I've had to work on.
Yeah, and we've come across it, I guess, in doing competency-based interviews, for
Mm,
example. And it's one of the things I bang on about a bit is the sense that people working in organisations often don't get the feedback that says this is a real competency area for you. And they don't get to understand that the competency isn't just about being able to do the job. It's actually about understanding, exactly as you said,
yeah.
why they do something. What theories are informing their
Mm,
approach to a particular problem, for example. And I think it's something, you've spoken about the importance of
mm,
organisations promoting people and giving them good feedback. And
yes.
certainly I endorse that idea.
Yes. Just on when you asked me a minute ago, Lily, just about, the advice to women in the pub, didn't want to sound too negative in terms of the family piece, but I was just trying to be honest about,
Mm,
that sense of sacrifice that you do need to make. But in terms of a career for women, those that want children, that have families, it's a terrific career. I mean,
Mm.
I encourage anyone more to think about a career in the civil service, to think about a career in the public service, in terms of what the opportunity they have to make a difference, and the rewards that come with that in terms of the collegiality, the camaraderie, the interesting work, the innovation, the change. Um, I'm even comparing, even quite recently, when I started in the civil service as an executive officer, I worked in revenue, and revenue were very clever. They were the first organisation that I can see in the public service to think about the people that they were dealing with as customers.
Mm.
Um, and they still, that kind of psychology of how they deal with people, how they interact with people. So that notion that every interaction with an organisation is a moment of truth, that's a really powerful concept for people to get their handle on. The service that I experience in all public services far exceeds the services that I experience in the private sector. Most people would think, they think about the public service, they don't think of it in that way. But if you consider interactions that I've had recently with health service, with banks, building societies, and other areas of the private sector, the service that most public servants is providing is much higher than what's happening in the private sector at the moment, because that concept of customer service seems to be gone, but it isn't gone in the public sector. We
Mm.
very much espouse that still. So just in terms of a career for people to think about, I would encourage people in to the civil service. And again, when I go back to my start of my journey, 30, I was going to say 33 or 31 years ago, it was 33 years ago at this stage, I'm the accidental civil servant. More
Mm.
and more often, I meet younger civil servants coming in, and they are not. They have targeted. They want to join. They've joined the civil service. They've joined as an administrative officer, a higher executive officer, an assistant principal officer, or higher grades because the opportunities are there. But a very rewarding career for those that come in.
And for those, would you suggest any particular course of study? What is it that equips somebody to come in at that level
Mm.
within the civil service?
Yeah, if I had mine to do over, I would have come in with a degree in law.
Mm.
I genuinely would. I'd mentioned earlier I applied for things like communications and marketing when I left school because I was good at talking and I could always talk my way out of a situation, I think. And I saw myself in that field. But through my work, I've had a lot of exposure to the legal system, to various cases that we've been dealing with, contractual business, and a lot of exposure to the legal system. And I think I would have done law. And from what I can see, a law degree, I think, is a really good foundation for lots of careers, but certainly one in the public service. I mean, there are kind of very specific third level courses at this stage that are oriented towards the public service, those that are in economics in the area of economic policy. People studying politics would often see themselves as having that insight into the political system. But just generally, I think law, economics, finance, all of those would equip you for a career in the civil service.
Okay, so much more. I would love to talk to you about, but I can't not talk to you about your passion about the exams system.
Mm,
And I know we couldn't possibly cover all of it, but you've talked about the changes that you've brought about in that
yeah.
organisation since you joined. What's the proudest thing that you've done in relation to exams?
Two actually stand out, and then I might talk about COVID separately because that's sort of a different form of
Mm.
achievement. One was in relation to exams policy. So we support students with special educational needs. And in 2016, I was involved in a fundamental reform of our policy and approach to how we provide for students with special educational needs. Up to then, the system had been quite difficult, I think, for students and parents and families to engage with. And we simplified the process at that point. And I had a very central role in that reform process, really leading through how we consider the types of reasonable accommodations that we're providing, but also the types of students that we're providing them to. And it really opened up the scheme of reasonable accommodations. And then secondly, in online marking. So the system when I joined was very paper based. We were moving, there was a lot of stuff, and there still is a lot of stuff because we have 130,000 students every year. We provide them with everything that they need to do their exams, not only the exam papers, but, down to the level of the paperclip or the treasury tag that they need, all of the stationery that they need over the course of the process. We have almost 25,000 teachers involved and SNAs involved when it comes to the marking, the supervision, the invigilation of the exams. So the delivery piece is huge, and the logistics associated with it are huge. Exam papers would come in, they would be marked by examiners, collected by them in Athlone, and then taken home by them and marked by them. That's all gone online. So now an exam paper comes in, it's scanned, and then it's marked through a digital marking system. So in 2023, we issued over 1 million grades to students, and 98% of those grades had been marked using the online marking system. So that started very small as a proof of concept that I was involved in way back in 2014. I really see it as something that I have been absolutely instrumental in terms of leading that change through the organization through a number of very difficult, and challenging times. And I was told at one stage that online marking wouldn't work in Ireland because we had a different standard setting approach to everybody else. So it has been in the UK, and that was almost a kind of a challenge to me to say, now, see if you can do it. So I did. And, it's one that's really revolutionized what we do in the organization. That's been a transformational change. And then we had COVID, and COVID was an extreme impact on the SEC. So in 2020, in 2021, in 2022, and to a lesser degree in 2023, but certainly those 3 years, 20 to 2022, this organization was involved in a completely different arrangement for the delivery of the examinations in each one of those years. So effectively, we had to reinvent ourselves each year in order to provide an alternative to students coming through the system. And I firmly believe that the experience that the organization had from other changes, such as the reasonable accommodations change and also online marking, meant that we were equipped, as best we could be equipped, but we were equipped to innovate through a very, very difficult and very challenging period. So, and that, I'm scratching the surface because as an organization, I think we punch above our weight in terms of what we deliver. The core team here is in around 200 people, but providing this major national service in collaboration with schools, with school staff, with school leaders, with principals, teachers, lots of people involved, but just this core team of 200 people, delivering an awful lot for the state.
And Andrea, how did you persuade them to go with the online marking then? So I'm curious again because I suppose, for women in positions of power with, women who have ideas about how things could be better.
Yeah.
Up against a system often that isn't that flexible. So
Yeah.
I agree with what you've said about public service has lots of flexibility in some areas, but it takes something to actually influence often not just one person but lots of people in order to try something so completely new and scary. How did you do that?
By thinking about what the reactions were going to be. So, in other changes, and if everybody's had that, it's not broke, don't fix it. And why would you want to go at that? And we've always done it like this. And, those kind of things, they really were like challenges to me. They were like red rags when somebody would say that. And I said, well, it's our job to innovate. It's our job to change. It's our job to improve. How I did it was by bringing people on board and actually trying to identify some of the gatekeepers in the organization, people who I thought would be really influential. And if they came on board, that others would listen to them. And I can think of one individual in particular who identified as someone who'd be cautious but not completely change averse. And I thought to myself, well, if I get them on side and bring them into the team, they will be very influential with others. And so they were. So they were in the team from the beginning. But I was trying to influence not just the individuals to sort of come with the change, but also my, people who were on the senior management team here at the time and who said it's not going to work because we tried it at some stage before and we piloted this and it didn't work. So it was, I use an expression, think big and start small with any change process.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to get it all done from the beginning. You need to prove that it can work. And sometimes even to yourself. Like, as I said, I'm very interested in change. I have this expression in the organization that IT is like fairy dust. It can do anything. I absolutely know that that's not the case. But, but I think it's also challenging people to say, the easiest answer that we can give in any situation is probably no, that can't be done. So you do need to work with people to sort of challenge that and say, well, why not? Or could we try this? Or is there another alternative? So I employed every strategy that I possibly could to bring the change in relation to online marketing over the line. I was able to prove it worked in a proof of concept in 2015. I was able to prove it worked in a live test that we ran in 2016 and 2017. And that was enough to convince everyone in the organization that this was really good and something that could be done. But the person that I referred to there that I said were very influential, there was an IR dimension to this as well. And I remember, a meeting in 2018 where this was sort of the last ditch. We actually need to get everybody on board formally. I don't mean the hearts of the people that were in the team, but the
Mhm.
whole organization. And remember asking a question of that person, and I almost kind of had to catch my breath to think, what if they say it's terrible or it's not going to work? But of course, they didn't. They said, no, this is something that we really need to do, we should be doing, and that will bring the organization into the 21st century.
Mm.
So, and again, that was something that I had seen from my kind of early days in revenue, was that, if we can convince the most reluctant person in the organization, then, the rest will be
Mm.
fairly straightforward. So there was an element of being tactical in terms of recognizing that not everybody was going to come with me. And also, you said at the beginning, Lily, about as a woman, and I was obviously a lot younger, when I started some of these changes, and there is an element, oh, I'm not going to be doing what she's telling me to do, or, why would I want to be led by you? So I think you just need to be careful and not standing up in front of people to say this change is great, but actually working behind the scenes, talking to people, asking them about their own ideas and what they would do, and just trying to bring everyone along. You will not get everyone. You won't get everyone. There's always going to be a cohort of people who will not come along with the change. The trick there is identifying them as early as you possibly can and moving on without them, actually.
Mm. Oh, well, finding ways to minimize the damage that they can do, so to speak.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I know that that's literally scratching the surface of what it means to you to work in this organisation. I suppose the thing that, as I said, I know from working with you is that the student is the absolute beginning and end, in a sense, for you. Do you want to say a little bit about that, just that kind of commitment, public service commitment, if you like,
Yeah,
to...
yeah, absolutely. And it's not mine; it's an organizational commitment. It's
Mm.
one that this organization has grown up with. Is that concept of the candidate? We call them candidates. Had this discussion with school leaders where they're students in their world and
Mm.
candidates in ours. They are genuinely at the center of everything that the state examinations does. So we're providing this national service. We're providing it at scale, and it's logistically very challenging to deliver the service to 130,000 students every year. But we deal with them at the level of the individual student, and not just as a part of this machine of examinations. When we do get contacts and queries and questions and situations involving students, um, everyone here will pull out the stops to do as much as we possibly can do. And there are things we can't do, things that we're asked to do, but I believe we're really making a difference and have really improved the service that we provide to students with things such as the scheme of reasonable accommodations, um, looking to bring in more assistive technology in the examinations, and also most recently the scheme of deferred examinations. So for students who experience a crisis at examinations time, they have the opportunity to sit a deferred examinations later in the summer and still have their results at the same time as everyone else. And until relatively recently, if that happened, a student had a major illness or experienced an illness in June, their only opportunity to get their exam results was to sit the exams again the following year. So we've been doing an awful lot to sort of recognise um, life is complicated and things happen, including at the time of the examinations. Um, we have a very simple mission in the organisation, which is to deliver very, very high quality examinations to the students of Ireland. And our goals are very clear in terms of their focus on that goal, on that mission. Everything that we do is centred around the student, all of the supports that we put in place, think about the student. And I think the student voice has become very prominent in the field of education in the last number of years. And again, through COVID, we work with the likes of the Irish Second Level Students' Union and listen to them in terms of their views and perspectives on the systems of examinations that we're providing. So it is a national service. It needs to be delivered at scale, but never losing focus on who it is that we're serving. Students that are in third year and those that are in sixth year taking their examinations. And it's a really stressful time. I think we recognize that as well. For them, it's really stressful, particularly for Leaving Cert students. And the last thing that we want to do is that the service that we provide or how they engage with that service is complex or tricky or they don't understand it. So it needs to be streamlined, it needs to be smooth, it needs to go right. And then when it doesn't go right, and it doesn't always go right, we have systems and procedures in place that we can make sure that a student gets the result that they should get for the work that they put in and that their effort is recognised. So it's really interesting. Lots of things can happen and lots of things have happened in the 20 years that I've been working in the State Examinations Commission. I would never say there's a situation that I've seen before. There's always something new or novel that you'll encounter every year that you haven't seen before. But again, as I said, you've mentioned it, the common purpose, that social purpose that we share in the organisation of delivering the service. It's ingrained in people. And if you come here, if you come to the State Examinations Commission and you talk to the people that work in the organisation, it's the candidate. That's what their focus is on at all times.
So, Andrea, I suspect this isn't the end of the changes that you're going to make nationally. Have you a sense of a next step, or is that too big a question to ask in this forum?
Probably too big a question in this forum. There's certainly, there's lots that I'd like to change I won't say in the organisation. It's for the organisation. And there are others in the organisation that also want to make changes. The difficulty for us always is changing a service while not impacting on the business as usual delivery. I was thinking about it yesterday. In a Formula One team, when they have a pit stop, they actually drive into the pit and stop. There's nobody trying to change the wheel on the car while they're driving around the circuit. There's an element of that for us in terms of trying to make change, but we have to keep going. So nothing can stop. There can't be an impact on the business as usual. So I have lots of things that I'd like to do in this organisation and help the organisation in terms of the transformational journey that we've been on. For me personally, I don't know. I'm 4 years in the job in November, so only just 3 years in the job. I'd certainly see myself here for another little while. And then who knows, at that stage, there are other things that I would like to do as well.
Not least study law or
Yes.
study Harry Clarke's Windows.
Either or
Either
both,
or.
actually.
Fantastic. Is there one final word of wisdom that you'd like to share with women who may be listening to us, either women who are currently in a career in the public service or young women who might be considering joining?
Yes. I mentioned it is a fantastic career. It really is. It has huge opportunities. It has the reward balance in terms of a sense of purpose and a sense of fulfillment and a sense of achievement that you can get with a job in the civil service. I would advise young women in any job thinking about promotion, particularly those thinking about promotion, actually, be confident in your abilities. Be confident in what you're able to do, and don't allow a sense of self-doubt to sneak in and take away your opportunity. There are lots of people that will go for promotion where their sense of ambition is greater than their sense of achievement and personal achievement. And I do find that for most women, it's the opposite. They can kind of talk themselves out of the role that they want to go for. And I would just advise people not to let that happen. People have so much to offer in an organisation. They have huge levels of ability and talent and purpose. But I think for women particularly, they can second guess themselves and self-doubt can creep in and take away that opportunity from them. So I would caution that wouldn't happen to your listeners.
Yeah, and without being self-serving, but you mentioned the use of, or they having access to a coach at some point during your career.
Yep.
I do think it behoves people and organisations to offer support, that kind of external view that enables people to kind of reflect on where they are at in their career, what they want for themselves, what their ambitions are, and how, how they have already prepared themselves for that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mentioned I have used a professional coach at certain stages, and it's really, really helped me just even to gain a perspective. Sometimes you can overwhelm yourself by thinking you're overwhelmed, actually. And if you're, someone to help you step back and say, actually, what do you think? And maybe just to hold up the mirror as well a little bit and say, well, is there something you're doing here? Is there something else? Do you need to do that? Do you need to stay and get that done? What happens? The place is going to fall apart if you just get up off the desk and leave and go home at a normal hour. You know, so I think there's huge value in working with a professional coach for the day-to-day stuff, but also the longer term work as well. I found it hugely rewarding. I found it self-improving, and I found it helped me to gain a sense of perspective on my work. And I absolutely agree that for organizations, in terms of supporting people, things like coaching, mentoring, having a buddy in the organization, all of those things are things that will really help individuals to flourish and thrive in their job.
Andrea, we're going to end there. I have really enjoyed this conversation, as I knew I would, and I'm always inspired by your commitment.
Well, thank you.
Change and your passion for education. So yeah, thank you for doing that service on behalf of us, the public.
Thanks, Lily. No, I appreciate that. I found it hard. I really appreciated even reflecting and thinking about the conversation today. And even as I was saying, I joined the civil service in 1991. It's really hard for me to think that I'm 33 years working. It feels like the blink of an eye. It just doesn't feel like that length of time. And I'm very happy if I have given something, I'm very happy to have given something. But I'm here for the long haul. I'm not going anywhere yet. What's that retirement age again? 75? That'll do.
Good for you. All right, Andrea, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
If you've enjoyed today's show, do like and share the podcast. If you'd like to hear more interviews with smart, ambitious, passionate women in the public service, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. We welcome positive feedback and suggestions for future guests you'd like to hear from. Meantime, goodbye from me, Lily Murphy, and all the team at Her Next Step. Remember to look for the stepping stone that will support your next step, or consider how you could be the stepping stone for somebody else.